This is Creepy and Geeky. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, I'll be talking to new guest Johnnie Jae about the Disney Plus MCU series Echo. But first, Donna and I are talking about the stuff we got into this last week. How's it going, Donna?
Hey, Robert. It's going pretty good.
Good.
We're already in March,
Yeah.
and oh my gosh, this year is already going by pretty quick.
Once we got past the 6 months of January, then things have actually been going pretty fast.
I
So, but
know.
that January was like nightmarishly long,
It
and
was
then
like 4 months long.
February zipped by. So
Oh
yeah,
my
so
gosh.
we're already in the second week of March, which is crazy. Like March just started. I keep thinking it just started, and no, we're already more than a week in. So it's too funny. But yeah, no, it's going well so far, so that's good. All right. Well, I've got a few things. I know you said off air you got a couple of things, so why don't you go ahead and start us off?
So the first thing I wanted to talk about, hopefully people will watch this. Hard Eyes is actually available for streaming now, so you can
Yes.
actually watch it from the comfort of your home. And I implore you to do so because
Oh,
it's so
yes.
much freaking fun. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it is very much I feel like it's very much a horror rom-com. Like like in every perfect way.
Hmm.
It's like it doesn't skimp on the gory horror and it doesn't skimp on the actual relationship that's
Right.
growing in the movie. So definitely check that out because it's so much fun. All right. Yeah, definitely check that out. I My first thing is there's a new trailer for an Amazon Prime series coming with Kevin Bacon as the lead. It's called The Bondsman.
I saw that. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And I was surprised too because I was watching the trailer and I was like, wow, they're fitting a lot of stuff into one movie. And then it was like, it's a new series. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Um, it's giving me Reaper vibes. I'm not sure if you remember this, but there was a TV show back on the CW, in the early 2000s called Reaper, where
I do remember that.
the devil tasked this kid with um, hunting down the souls of the damned who'd escaped hell. This is literally like the exact same setup. This bondsman dies, goes to hell, and then is tasked by the devil to literally be a bounty hunter for hell and go get these demonic souls that have escaped from hell. So
Yeah, it looks
meanwhile he's
really
trying to
good.
patch up his family, his fractured
Yeah.
family. So yeah, no, it looks fantastic. Looks like a
I'm kind
lot
of
of fun.
excited about it simply because I'm a huge Kevin Bacon fan, and it's nice to see him kind of returning those. I mean, he's been doing a lot of horror stuff
He's been
lately,
doing a
so it's
lot of
been
horror
great.
lately, which has been
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
And
No,
he's still in, pretty good shape. So this
yeah.
this looks like a good fit for him. He knows how to be funny and, also has
Right.
little action stuff going on. I don't know if you ever saw the show he was on, The
The
Following. I think it was on
following, yeah.
Fox. That was really kind of cool. But
Yeah.
this really intrigued me. I cannot wait to see how this is going to play out. I think it'll fill that supernatural void that people, if you like the show Supernatural,
Yeah.
you'll probably
I
like
don't
this
think
one.
anything's gonna fill that void.
I think it'll help.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. But for people who are diehard fans
Right.
of those kind of procedural, we have to get this demon or whatever, they probably will love this one. It looks like it'll be a lot of fun.
This is not on my list at all, but I did see that there was a little goofy not a trailer, but just like a little goofy tease that the boys this season is going to be having Jared Padalecki on it. So it's going to be a full-on Supernatural reunion because Eric Kripke, who created Supernatural, is the showrunner for the
Right.
boys TV series, and they've already had on Jensen Ackles. So I think Jared Padalecki's coming on for an episode that Jensen will probably still be on as well. So, and it was a whole funny thing about them calling, like them talking to each other, and they're like, "Oh, somebody needs to call Misha." So,
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
probably gonna happen sooner.
Oh, I'm sure because I'm pretty sure this is the last season of of the boys. So that would be hilarious if we got a little full um supernatural reunion with all of them. So,
Now, I
but
will let you know that was one of my items, so you already covered
oh
it, but
no,
that's
for
no,
real?
no, no, that's perfectly fine.
I'm
But I
so
but I
sorry.
always
I thought it
no,
was so
no.
small that it wouldn't have been a thing.
We always cross over at some point.
That was not
Don't
on my
worry about
list.
it.
Oh man. Now I actually feel bad. That's so funny.
No.
I
Why
know,
would
but
you feel
still,
bad? We have
I took something away from you. So
Di, get over
I tried
yourself.
not to. All right.
So
So what is
I can
another
tell you
thing?
my last thing,
Okay. Sorry.
which may be one of your trailers as well.
Yes.
They actually released the Last of Us season 2.
That is
I'm
one of my
assuming
things.
this
Yeah.
see? So there we go. We
Yeah,
great
but I
power
always have
minds.
more. I always have a ton because I like, I try to stack mine just in case because I knew you were going to have The Last of Us on there. So,
Yeah,
but
of
they,
course
yeah,
I'm gonna have the Last of Us
I
on
know.
there.
Well, honestly, I wasn't sure because the trailer only got released yesterday, so I didn't know if you caught it in time. So,
It has
yeah.
Pedro Pascal. I'm catching
You
everything that he's
got
been.
alerts set up for Pedro Pascal, huh?
I do. But anyway, this trailer, my goodness,
Yes.
if you know nothing about the game, if you know nothing about The Last of Us Part 2, the video game, fans are gonna be in for it. You might wanna just buckle in.
Yeah.
This is going to
I'm one of
be
those people who's never played the game, never watched the game or anything like that. So my whole exposure was the first season. So
yeah,
I'm pretty hyped for this.
I'm super excited. As you know, I covered the first season. I plan on covering the second season in a weekly episode. But
Yes.
this trailer had me gasping. I remembered a lot of the stuff from the gameplay. I know this is gonna have a lot of people talking. This season is
Yeah.
gonna be a mind job on you. It really will be one. I want to say so much, but I cannot.
Yeah.
And
I'm
they
ex
take liberty and they change stuff
Yeah.
too. So a lot of it may not be exactly like I remember in the game anyway. So
Right. I'm excited. Caitlin Deaver's joining the cast, and I've always liked her. So she's always been a really good actress.
now she was
So
in Booksmart. Was it Booksmart?
she was in Booksmart. Yeah, she was on that TV show Last Man Standing, and then she was also in the that Hulu alien invasion movie. I can't think of where she there was like barely any dialogue at all in it. But she was fantastic in that.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, she should be a very welcome addition to this cast because the character she's playing is probably one of my favorite ones that I've seen in a video game in a long time.
Yeah. No, I've heard good things. So yeah, the movie was called No One Will Save You. It's on Hulu. So but yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it looks really good. All right. Well, this week was the premiere of Daredevil Born Again. Um, and they dropped the first two episodes, which was kind of crazy.
I didn't
Um,
expect them to drop two. That
yeah,
was
I didn't know they were dropping two either. I thought they were only doing one a week, and then that was going to be it. But they were like, nope,
mhm.
we're doing two this week. I was like, okay then. So, but yeah, no. And to be fair, like I did watch the first two seasons of the Netflix Daredevil when it
Mhm,
came out. I watched basically everything until the Defenders miniseries, and then I
mhm,
dropped off and didn't finish anything else. So I haven't seen the third season of Daredevil, the second or third seasons of Jessica Jones, or the second seasons of Luke Cage and Iron Fist. So I met, oh, and none of Punisher. So I haven't seen any of that yet. I need to go back and rewatch all those. Um, but I wasn't, thankfully, I wasn't too far out of like my depth. I knew just enough about what had happened in that stuff
right.
to understand what was going on in this new series. Um, but they did a pretty good job at kind of getting you back up to speed and and jumping into the new into the new series. So that was good. So I'll definitely be talking more about this in a future episode later on in the year once it's all done. So
Oh, I agree with you. I think they did a good job of filling in all of the things you may have missed if you haven't seen all of those things, 'cause it didn't seem like it was out of character. None of the everything in the story felt like you could have just walked in and started from this beginning. Um, it was really a great opener, I thought.
yeah,
We got to see
I
some
did
new
too.
characters and, um, some new heroes. I really am all in on this because
Yeah. Oh, same. Yeah.
just watching D'Onofrio and him as Fisk, I think he might be my favorite bad guy to watch just because I love that actor so much. But it's definitely one we can see people are gonna be backsliding into old habits and
Yeah.
they've already started, and it's gonna ramp up really quickly. I can already feel it.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, it looks like it's going to be real fun, real interesting. So we'll see how it goes. Um, all right. Uh, did you have anything else, or were you
I
done?
didn't. It's all
Okay.
you. The floor is
All
yours.
right. Well, I have two more things. I do have. There was a new trailer for the movie The Woman in the Yard, and it's more of the story based trailer, so you get a little bit
Mhm.
more information on it. There's some extra shenanigans going on with the titular woman in the yard. It looks scary. Looks a lot of fun. I wasn't sure if this one was going to be on your list if you caught that one in time, but yeah, no, it really does look interesting. Um, I don't know if I'll go to the movies, like to the theater to see this one. It's one of those ones that kind of is like, it looks good, but I don't know if I'll be able to catch it, you know?
Right.
It was kind of like that one with the that Halle Berry movie from last year, that I still haven't watched. And I need to. So, um, but yeah, this one it does look good though. It looks very interesting.
It looks interesting. I'm like you. I'm probably well, just because I'm not a staunch moviegoer anyway,
Right.
I'll probably end up waiting until it's on demand because at the rate that everything seems to be, 30, 45 days and it's
Right.
available for streaming. So that's probably how I'll watch this one. But I am very much interested to see what this
Yeah.
story is and where it's going.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a watch. Whether or not I get to go to the theater or not, different story. But yeah, definitely a watch down the road for sure. So it looks really good. All right. Well, the last thing I have is the band Ghost released a new video song and video for their upcoming album. The song is called Satanized. And if you like that kind of music, definitely go check it out. It's a lot of fun. It also introduces the new Papa, the new anti-Pope character uh, that is part of the whole lore of the band. So I'm digging the new Papa 5. Um, it's got a very purple, very metallic skeleton thing going on with everything. So um, I'm digging the whole new look. And the
You've
name
seen
was
them in concert too, right?
I
I
have
mean, I know.
not. I've not. I
Oh,
would love to, but like they are coming to my area. But the nosebleeds are like 52 and anything closer is like 100, 200, up to like crazy amounts.
right,
So I don't think I'm probably going to go. I'll admit I'm not a huge concert person. I would go to them if I could. But because of the theatricality and stuff like that.
right.
I like a good show. Like if you're gonna put on a good show, like that's awesome. And I did buy their and I did just watch it this week. I bought their movie right here, right now on 4K, and so I did finally catch up with that, and that was fun. That was a great experience.
That's
But I kind
cool.
of like watching it, like watching it via that more than being in the concert venue
Right.
itself. Um, but um, but yeah, no, this if you dig their music, you'll if you dig their music, you probably already know about this song. But maybe if you're only like mildly interested in them, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. So, but yeah, that's all I have. Not a ton, but a few things. There was a little bit of crossover, obviously.
Hey, it happens. What are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
yeah. That's so funny. I didn't think you were gonna have the boys thing on there. That's too funny. It was such a minor blip thing that I didn't even I barely caught it, so that was funny. But yeah. But yeah, it's been a good week. Lots of stuff. I didn't get to go see a movie this last week. But I do plan on going on Tuesday to go see the new movie Mickey 17. So I'll have that to talk about next week.
Oh,
So
cool. I
yeah.
am very much excited to hear how that will be. We were contemplating going Friday and we ended up doing something else when we played hooky and took a half day off. Um, so we ended up going to the park and walking. It was just nice. But um, yeah, I want to see that. I'm really kind of excited to see Novocaine. I'm trying to get
Yes.
everybody geared up to go see that with me.
Yeah, that's high on my list for sure. So, an action comedy, I'm sold.
Yeah,
So,
really.
I'm not all about horror, people. Come on. No. All right. Well, I will before we move on to the rest of the show, why don't you let us know what you've got going on your show this week?
Absolutely. So since it is Women's History Month and I'm still doing Women in Horror, featuring horror films directed by female directors, I'm going to be talking about Jennifer's Body just because I've never talked about
Yes.
Jennifer's Body in full, and I'm super excited to lay into that one. So that's what's coming up next.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I haven't even talked about that one yet either. I'll definitely be doing that. Maybe I'll do it for next year. So, but yeah, definitely. That's a good one to talk about for sure. I'll be excited to listen to it. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I appreciate
Yeah,
it. And
always.
we'll see you again next week. And until then, stay creepy. On today's episode, I'll be taking a look at the MCU Disney Plus show Echo with my guest, Johnnie Jae. Johnnie is an Oto, Missouri and Choctaw multimedia journalist, artist, speaker, advocate, and most importantly, a community builder. Through workshops, speaking engagements, and resource development, Jay empowers Indigenous communities to reclaim and assert their narratives, believing in the power of radical imagination and education to drive healing and transformation. Jay is the founder of a tribe called Geek and Grim Narrative. They are a coordinating council member and co lead of the Sharing the Story Committee for the Walking in the Footsteps of Our Ancestors project, as well as the host of the podcast Talking in the Footsteps of Our Ancestors. They are also a registered artist with the Choctaw Nation and an artist with Eighth Generation. Welcome to the show, Johnnie.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. That is quite an impressive set of accomplishments there. Things you're doing. You're involved. So that's what's great. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Me, I'm just a lazy dude barely having a job at this point. You're over here just, changing the world, which is awesome. I love it when people are just like out there changing the world for the better. So that's very cool.
Yeah, well, you got to do something in this
You do.
lifetime.
You do. You do.
You
I
know,
try to do little things here and there, but yeah,
well,
definitely. I'm more focused on my family more than anything else.
well,
So
that's what's important. And I think
yeah,
that's one of the things I always try to stress too is that, a lot of people think you have to be doing the big things, or
right.
if you're not doing the big things, you're not doing anything. But to be honest, like it's always those little things. And
Yeah.
like positive change to me, it starts in your home. It starts with
Yeah.
you. It starts with like being a good dad, a good mom, a good brother, sister, like all those little things
Right.
ripple.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like to think I'm a good dad. You'd have to ask my kids that, but but they're both adults and they all live with me, so it works. They must think I'm not terrible enough, so which is good. But yeah, no, no, I believe in that same, the small things and doing the little bits that you can and everything like that. So we talked about this a little bit off air, but that's why like I very much focus this podcast with my guests being largely, women, people of color, and the queer community, because those are voices that don't get to be, heard as often as they should be. And so, I definitely try to do that with my small audience out there, trying to push out there and, hope that, they get heard. So, because those stories are more important than the same, well, not more important, but equally important as, the white voices that have been overwhelming everything over the years. So, the white male voices. So we need a lot more. They're trying to squash it, but we do need a lot more diversity out there. So we're gonna keep pushing it, and we're gonna keep doing what we can. So
Absolutely.
and that's what brings us to a really great show that came on Disney Plus recently, which was a follow-up to the Hawkeye show, and also picked up threads from the Daredevil Netflix TV series, which was Echo, which featured Alakwa Cox in the main role, which she reprised from her time on Hawkeye, which was great, and picks up threads from that. This is such a really great show. I really enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it more on this rewatch than I did even the first time, because I think I appreciate what they do with the doing it one at a time on the like one episode a week. Although they didn't do that with this one. This was the one episode, one show that they didn't do that on. So that's right. They actually dropped all the episodes for this show at once, which I thought was a weird thing to do, because normally they do like to spread it out. And I felt like they were actually trying to just shove it all out there and like go, okay, here's the show. We're not going to really worry about it. Like, let's hope it does well, but we're not going to care if it does or not. So, so it was a little weird. But I do remember enjoying it the first time, but this time I really enjoyed it, even more so than before. And it's just a lot of it has to do with Alakwa Cox, and just the supporting cast is just amazing. The people who play her family and the locals in Tamaha they're fantastic, and it's such a great look at that community as well. So I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this one. What obviously, you've previously been on podcast 616 talking to my friends about this show. So obviously, it touched something with you as well. So why don't you
Oh,
go ahead and
yeah.
tell us about it?
Well, I agree with your assessment that, it seemed very just rushed.
Right.
And we know that there were like a lot of production delays, and like even when it dropped, there was a lot of criticism that it seemed very choppy and rushed.
Hmm.
And I can see that. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that because of those production cuts and funding, and that the series wasn't exactly how it was meant to be, that there were supposed to be more episodes, and
Yeah.
and things had to get cut, and they were trying to get as much as the story in as possible. So I see why it ended up so choppy.
Right.
But I still think that overall they did a pretty good job of trying to get everything that they needed to into the story. um and it was like I watched the show, and like aside from the technical things, like the choppiness and just
Right.
little things like, especially as a critic, right? Like you're just automatically going to pick up on these things and be like, okay, something's a little off right here. But story wise, the acting, and I know I'm biased because I'm Choctaw, but to me it was just phenomenal watching this. And then also, I think the coolest thing was the fact that, they really collaborated with the Choctaw Nation on this.
Yeah.
And, to the point where there is a separate website for Echo on the Choctaw Nation website, to kind of explain some of the symbology, some of the
That's awesome.
culture, and, and just kind of like give people an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what they're seeing in this show that they may not be familiar with but interested in, because the symbology was absolutely amazing in the ways that it was incorporated. Like even from the very first episode, the way that they brought in the creation story of the Choctaw people, they took some liberties with it, of course, but
Right.
when I was watching these scenes, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I was kind of nerding out because you never think that you're going to see this on on a screen.
Right.
And especially, if you're a nerd, I grew up on Marvel and DC, and to see my culture being a part of this landscape that, I'm such a fan of, was like my little heart was just beating out of my chest watching this.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is something I wanted to get into with you and to talk to you about how um accurate everything was and how much it was like how much of it was I guess not just accurate but um in terms of the history but also just in the overall feeling of it and everything, like as somebody who is not just Native American but specifically Choctaw, that you like I love to hear that it connected with you on that level. That it spoke to you and that it was at least, mostly correct in the way that they were telling the story. And I love that, especially as somebody who is like me. I love learning about other cultures and everything. I love mythology and folklore, and just the stories of other cultures, the things that we tell each other. And so that like what and that's what see, and this is what I try to tell people too, is that popular culture is a version of modern folklore in a way. It's a way of telling stories, telling our myths and our stories in ways that are going to pass on to future generations, and however whatever format they're going to be. But I love that about pop culture, and I love that when pop culture can do it like this and pass on history and that folklore of a certain people, that just I don't know, I just love that so much, and especially if they get it right. So I guess that was my question was, you know wanted to talk to you about was, did they how much of it did they get right? What was not right? What were they things that they didn't get right?
Well, it's not really a matter of them not getting it right, but just kind of like taking a little creative liberties,
Right.
to kind of fit the narrative into this world.
Okay.
And I think that's okay to do. I don't think that, like when we're talking about like native representation in film, I'm cool with there being like creative liberties, little changes, little tweaks, to make it more realistic. And, we know this is fantasy, but to
Right.
make it fit within that fantastical world. And for the most part, like when they showed the creation story, like it was, they kind of showed it as these, I guess you would say they almost seemed like interdimensional beings,
Right.
that were in this cave, and they found themselves being transformed into humans. And then they became the Choctaw Nation. And that's kind of the way they showed it in, Echo.
Right.
And, the real story is about two brothers, Choctaw and Chickasaw, or Chickasaw, which is, two tribes now. We have the Choctaw, we have the Chickasaw. And there we're two tribes that are very closely related. Our creation stories are very similar. Um, and, it's about us emerging from the mounds,
Mm.
which are a huge part of Choctaw and Chickasaw cultures. And this is how we became the first people. And, we came through these mounds, and we emerged into the daylight to become the Choctaw. And, these mounds, especially the main mound, Nani, I think it's Waia, um, was the first settlement, was the first site of the Choctaw and Chickasaw people. right? So,
Right.
it was a little play on that. And they made like these little tweaks to kind of fit into this fantastical world that is the MCU universe. And
Right.
so I think taking those um, liberties, I think it's okay to do that. And I think where it becomes a problem, though, is when, say, you take the Choctaw story, right? And you mix it with or you conflate it with like the Navajo creation story, or you
Mm,
put it into a context where it doesn't belong.
right.
And this could have been really messy, right? Because in the comic books, Echo is Blackfeet. And, I was
Oh,
a little disappointed that they changed her tribe because the Blackfeet um, would have been really cool to see their backstory too. And like I
right.
said, I'm biased because I'm Choctaw, so I like this change. But when I first heard that they were changing her nation, I was like, "That's what? Why?"
Right.
Like
Well,
that
and
seems like an unnecessary change to me.
yeah, and you would think it would be maybe because Alaqua Cox was Choctaw, but she's not either. So, so
Exactly.
that's not, that has no it's so it is that is definitely a weird change when it doesn't necessarily need to be. Maybe there was some kind of issue, maybe they were just when they were coming up with the narrative for it and everything like that, they decided,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and it comes to and it brings up a lot of like issues with like privilege too, right? So like the Choctaw is one of the largest nations and also one of the wealthiest. And
Mm,
I think that comes into it, just us having more visibility as Choctaw people, um, and having that more, I guess you would say, a little more sway than other tribes.
right.
So that could have played a part into it. And I do like what I do like it now, right? Because I'm Choctaw, so I'm biased.
Right.
And I love seeing my culture on the screen. But it did
Yeah.
feel like an unnecessary change to me. Um, and I still don't really understand it. I'm grateful for it, but at the same time, that was a missed opportunity to showcase more about the Blackfeet Nation and their
Right.
history as well. Um, but like when it came to the show, though, I think it worked really well, especially with the casting and the setting. And I kind of think that might have been one of the reasons is it might have been just more accessible to set it in a place like Oklahoma
Right.
and the Choctaw Nation. Um,
Well, and
because
that may have been it too. Like they were probably like the largest possibility is probably because they wanted the highest visibility. They wanted
it's,
something where one, they could operate it in Oklahoma, even though I think they filmed most of it in Georgia.
yeah, they did. And see, and that was another thing that really kind of, just like, what?
Yeah.
Because, but here's the other thing, though, is that Georgia looks very similar to the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma as far
Okay.
as the setting, because it's southeast Oklahoma and it is very green.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is, like I mean, it looked very similar. Like, when I found out that it was actually formed in Georgia, I was like, oh, I was like, what? Like, I didn't, because I was also looking like for familiar landscapes in Oklahoma because, I grew up in Oklahoma
Right.
and Choctaw. So that's like, I know the area and I know like the landscape. And there were certain, I kept thinking, well, this doesn't really look right. But, I was like, Oklahoma's probably changed since I've lived there. And then I found out it was Georgia, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. But
That's too
like,
funny.
but I see why how they kind of worked it.
Yeah.
Like, and even with the story, how they were able to incorporate that the Choctaw Nation into that, the creation story, and even just the communities, which is amazing because there are so many people like in the background of the show that I know. The stickball episode, where it shows them playing stickball.
Right.
Um, the chief who's sitting up in the box is actually one of my friends named Dwayne, and he is a stickball player. And so I was super excited to see that episode and to see him sitting up there. And it was because like I know him and he's goofy, but he looks so fierce.
That's so funny. No, that's awesome. Well, I'm good. I'm glad that at least for the most part they seem to have gotten it well done enough that it wasn't offensive. And that's like one
No.
of those things where it's like, and that's probably helped that they really were talking to a lot of the people. They really worked with the Choctaw Nation to, probably
Yeah,
for a lot of
and
the authenticity and to really,
exactly. And it
which is
was
great.
absolutely fantastic how they were able to work with the Choctaw Nation because, there were a lot of Choctaw artists. There was Stephen Paul Judd, who was one of the cultural consultants. Um, just there was Bobby Martin, who's also a fantastic um, Choctaw artist. His artwork was featured in the show. There were so many people who were able to contribute in different ways
That's
and that
awesome.
were Choctaw. And so that really made everything super authentic in the way that it felt, like in the story, like when you're looking at things, as a Choctaw person, you're watching this and you're seeing all these different elements. You're seeing artwork in the background. You're seeing, when they went into the shop that Tonto Cardinal and Graham Greene had there, and you could see all the different little artwork and just little tchotchkes and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, hey, I recognize that. Um, and because the artist who created all this stuff. And like it was amazing to be able to see that and to see that they worked so well, like even with the cultural consultants as far as like getting the language into the show as well.
Right.
Is something that is really important because that helps us to preserve a very vital part of our culture. Once our language is gone, then so are we in a lot of ways.
Right.
So to see our language being incorporated into shows like Echo, and then you have Prey, where it was the Comanche language,
Yes.
and then you're seeing like Star Wars being redubbed into Navajo and Ojibwe, and Finding Nemo into Navajo. That is really important because all of these movies that we have and TV shows, they're dubbed into so many languages because they're shown worldwide.
Right.
Yet it's rare for them to be dubbed into native languages in
Right.
our own country. So, it seems like a huge step forward to see that happening and to see people embracing native languages
Right.
and knowing that they exist here. And it's incredible to see that work. I mean,
Yeah.
and
No,
sometimes
exactly. Sorry,
just
go
a
ahead.
little snippet, but just to hear your language being spoken, um, does so much, especially, like to keep it relevant as well. Because, I think with how fast the world is changing around us and moving
Right.
towards technology, sometimes it's easy to kind of forget that, like your languages or your traditions, like they're still needed. They're still relevant in this
Right.
modern landscape. And so like being able to translate it into like Echo or to Prey and all of these different franchises, it kind of reminds our youth that they're still needed, they're still relevant, and gets them interested in learning them on their own too, where it's not just, us older people preaching at them like you have to do this. It's like
Right.
giving them the opportunity to see and to learn and engage with it on their own terms.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, and I think that's what's important about doing shows like Echo, and movies like Prey, which Prey should have gotten a theatrical release. It's so good. It should not have been relegated to just Hulu. But I'm glad it did well enough to get a physical release though.
Yeah, but I also feel sorry for the shows that came after Prey that they rethought the streaming release because when they bombed in the theaters,
Yeah, yeah.
and and I kind of feel bad about that.
True. I mean, but that was the interesting thing about that kind of situation was like they kind of went one way with a few things, and then they were like, well, okay, so this probably could have done well in theaters, so let's push out these other things. It's like, well, let's think about these real quick before you just shove things out that might not do well
Exactly.
on, it's like it's a case by case basis. Um,
Exactly. And Prey absolutely deserved that theatrical release
oh,
because that
yeah,
was,
definitely.
that's another, Echo and Prey are some of the series that I could just talk about forever because of the cultural relevance.
Yes.
Like, I mean, there's so much within Echo. Um, and the storyline, I think one of the best things about the storyline of Echo that I really enjoyed is that she got to be fallible. And when it
Yes.
comes to Native representation, we are often shown in like these one-dimensional roles where you're either just the hero, you're the noble savage, you're the,
Right.
the mystical healer savage, or the victim. Like there's
Yeah.
really no in between, or you're the super villain. And we
Yeah.
never really get to be shown as just fallible human beings who are capable of just being good and being bad, of just embodying all of humanity, right? Like with just being full, like a full human being. And I
Right.
really love that about Echo, about Maya, because she got to be fallible. Like she got to, in many regards, and depending on your perspective or your role in this universe, she's a villain or she's the hero.
Right. Well, and that's what's interesting about the character itself too in the show is that, she starts off as this, very angry person who's, had these multiple tragedies in her life. And, it's made her such an angry person and makes her want to, be this, like she says, the queen pin of everything. But then, that's that journey through these this story is once she, it's about that connecting with that past and her heritage, and then also kind of resolving those long-standing um grievances. And once she gets past that, it- like that's the thing, it doesn't leave her like as suddenly a hero either. That's what I think is
Yeah,
interesting about it too,
exactly.
is at the end that just because she confronted Kingpin doesn't mean she's now a hero to everybody. She's still a flawed person who's going to still need a lot of like time to grow and change if she is to become a hero. It's not going to be an overnight thing for her to move on to something more. So it's gonna take a little bit of time, and I love that it leaves it on that ambiguous state. Sure, she's changed, she's
Exactly.
embracing her family again, and her family's embracing her, but that doesn't mean she's given up on actually being a bad person. Um,
Yeah, or
but
being like kind of like a villain,
yeah,
or
exactly.
or being kind of like that shady person, which, I mean, I kind of see her character as being kind of like a Deadpool character, right? Kind of like the anti-hero, but not necessarily a villain or
Right,
hero. Just,
exactly.
they kind of whatever's there, they kind of just have to roll with it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And I like that about, Maya's character because she got to be flawed. She got to be, she got to do the bad thing. She got to be the bad girl and she got
Yeah,
to be fierce, but she also had a lot of tenderness, and you got to see that place of goodness where she did have a good heart, where she did think about others, even if she couldn't really express it.
right.
And, to see that through this story, just in different ways, to see her relationships grow with other people as she kind of allowed herself to trust them and let them in a little bit, was really interesting to see because it allowed us to see her as more than just kind of like, I guess you would say, the sidekick or the weapon,
Right.
which is very much how Fisk kind of just used her. Um, and you also got to see that relationship between him and her as well, which
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yes.
Like award winning, amazing. And I feel like they got robbed on that front because it was such a complicated relationship on both sides. And to see that kind of play out and to see them give Kingpin that opportunity to be emotionally vulnerable was like I was sitting there like, yes. Like it was something you didn't know you needed because I mean, Kingpin, he's iconic and they really kind of brought him down to this superhuman level with Maya that you don't get to see like in the comic books or in any
Right.
other like Daredevil especially, but so it was really unique to see them have that relationship and that emotional vulnerability. um and it just played into the story like it wasn't something that was forced.
No, yeah, no, it flowed very well, and I love that it was again a continuation of the storyline that first appeared in the Hawkeye TV show, which is very
Yeah,
underrated. Um, More
I
people need
you know I
to talk
agree
about
with
that one.
that. Yeah, like I mean it was like I mean when you first saw like when he first showed up and she realized like oh like okay this is it we're like she's ready to throw down
Yeah,
and they start talking and it doesn't really hit right away because she's still that angry person like she
right.
still doesn't see you know still hasn't seen like where a lot of her anger stems from and she's still just out for revenge and everything but to see that kind of like I was like, oh, it's going down now. but to see
Right,
it but to see it just kind of like grow from there.
right.
And especially when she used her powers to really bring up his trauma.
Well, yeah, it's she's making him confront his stuff, but also trying to heal him in a way, trying to have him like,
Follow her on the same journey.
yeah,
Like
she's
like
healing herself, and now she's trying to,
because she
because
loves him.
she
Right.
does, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
And
it's such a complicated fucking relationship, and I love it because it's so good at being complicated.
yes, and
And
allowing it
both
to be
actors are so good at
complicated.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, like because none of it felt forced or like they were just doing
No.
it for that emotional cookies.
Yeah.
Or to make it like or to add the drama. Like
Right.
it felt very natural for their characters and especially in the way that they played it because there was a deep respect and love between the two of them that was real. It wasn't just
Right.
him using her like he did everybody else.
Exactly. I mean,
And
yes, he did use her because that's inherently who the Kingpin is, but
exactly.
he still loved her in his way that he's capable of.
Yeah, and
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 that,
in his view, what he
yeah,
was doing was making her strong.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
He, and
Yeah,
like it was so like oh,
yeah.
the
Well, and this,
emotional skills.
yeah, and this goes to like a couple of things in terms of this show. One is the acting. Of course, Vincent D'Onofrio is a great actor. Alakwa Cox came out the gate, like, I'm pretty sure if I'm remembering correctly, Hawkeye was her first job. And
Yeah,
she
and
came
she
out the
was
gate hard with that
yeah,
and was
she
so good
worked
in
in
that.
an Amazon warehouse if I remember right.
Yeah.
And she, somebody told her about the auditions and she went and she is absolutely phenomenal. And the thing that
Yeah.
gets me is that, she is deaf and she's an amputee, which, I absolutely love that they were able to cast a disabled actress
Yeah.
um, and to have that disability representation as well.
Right.
And to not show her as the victim or being less than because of her
Right.
disabilities. She was so fierce.
Well, and it
But
brings, okay, go
the
ahead.
fact
Sorry.
that she is so different as a person than her character,
Yeah.
like this is her first acting job. And when I interviewed her about Echo, I was kind of expecting to talk to somebody who was a lot like Maya Lopez, who had that toughness and that
Right.
fierceness. And she is incredibly sweet, more of like the kind of person that you would associate with like happy rom-coms and comedies, and not like, and not Maya Lopez.
That's great.
And, you know, and even talking to her about the character, she said, you know, she had to have a lot of coaching to get into the mindset of Maya Lopez because she is
Mm.
different. And it was really hard for her to become Maya Lopez. And, you know, the fact that she was able to do that and in Hawkeye, and then she carried this entire series. And
Yeah.
like, I'm still just amazed because I'm just like, the skill, we need to see her in more.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing too, is like she was so phenomenal in Hawkeye that they were like, there were no plans for an Echo TV series before
Yeah,
that.
at
And
all.
then they suddenly were just like, she is so good. We're going to make a series for her, about her, you know, and about this character. And they were just like, this is just perfect, you know, because they could have just folded her into a future season of Daredevil, you know, because that's
Yeah.
where she first
And
appears in the comic books, is in a Daredevil comic.
yeah,
So it
and
would have
can
been
we
very
talk
easy to
about
do
that
that.
fight with Daredevil? Because holy balls,
Oh yeah.
I was like, this is amazing.
She holds her own. I mean, Kingpin is impressed with her. Nobody's ever like held their own against Daredevil. So,
Yeah. And I was just like, yes. And you know, and even just that scene, seeing that tension between the two of them, I was like, this works.
yeah,
And you don't see that in a lot with like a lot of these series, right?
right.
Um, there's like sometimes it seems like the interaction between characters that they bring in is, you know, they're there for the sake of being there, but
Right.
you don't really feel like the tension that you know should be there. And like I was just I can honestly say that I was in a little bit of shock with that throwdown with Daredevil because it was so good and the chemistry between them was so good that
Right.
when you know their story and how that's supposed to evolve, you're like, I can see this
Yeah.
and I want this. You know, like I need more of this.
Right.
And like and but just to know that, like you said, this is her first show,
Yeah.
to know how phenomenal she was and to be able to bring this character to life and to be able to interact with like D'Onofrio, who is just,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, he come on, D'Onofrio is a legend.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the way that he portrays Kingpin was terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, I love D'Onofrio and I've seen him in the serious roles. I've seen him in comedic roles, but to see him as Kingpin, like unleashed a whole new depth to him. Like he really took it there.
Oh yeah. No, like, and that's the thing too, is like you can tell he really enjoys playing Kingpin. This is like a career highlight for him in terms of
Yes.
characters that he's gotten to play. And I love that for him. Like he's never been one of those actors that I've especially enjoyed. But I didn't like he's not one of those actors that I like avoided. But it was just like one of those ones that his work, usually he did work in movies that I was just like, it's not something I want to watch. But you know, watching him in this, like in Daredevil, and then in this was just, it's just been phenomenal. His work in this, and this was the other thing that I was going to say. Besides the acting, but which is phenomenal between all of them, that it's also the writing and the direction on this show as well. You know, you're getting great writing, great direction in terms of moving these characters, and putting them in these situations, like we said, with that connection between Kingpin and Maya, that they have this deep connection. Yes, the actors are doing a great job on it, but it's also that writing. That writing is really, that's something that um the acting is elevating that writing, that if the writing were worse, then
No,
you know
yeah.
you'd have a
And
very poor story, and it'd be hard for even great actors to accomplish it.
exactly. And let me just say, you know, Stephen Paul Judd, who is a fantastic native artist, you know, I wear his t-shirts all the time. He's like a personal hero of mine. But he was one of the writers on the show, along with Rebecca Rowanhorse, who, you know, did Trail of Lightning, and she also did The Black Sun. And she's a phenomenal writer. She's written for Star Wars even. Bobby Wilson, who is with the 1491s, is one of the writers, and
Mm.
he's a comedic genius. He's so funny. But like to have these native writers in that writers room is what really gave it that authenticity, like to
Right.
bring these characters to life. And it's so cool. These are people. Rebecca Rowan Horace is a friend of mine, and to see them get these opportunities is so crazy to me, because I know that they are talented, and to see how this all shaped out was just beautiful, because there is that authenticity, there's a realness, and the characters, the way they all interact, especially the native characters, the grandma and the cousins,
Yeah.
that's very real. And you see that kind of like that closeness. It's very natural. The comedy and the seriousness of the show, it blends so well. Like none of it seems really out of place.
Right.
And Sydney Freeland, who directed 4 of the episodes and kind of really helmed this series, she is phenomenal. Like she did a lot of directing for Reservation Dogs. She's directed episodes for Rutherford Falls and a lot of these films, but and recently she directed Resball, which was a hit for Netflix.
Mm.
Um, but she also has roots in directing for like Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and she worked on The Walking Dead. She was part of these different franchises.
Right.
And, that experience really comes into play with these series. And, to give natives the opportunity to kind of like have control of the narrative really does make a difference, because
Yeah.
we talked about it earlier, like this show could have gone so wrong with the native representation
Yeah.
very easily. It could have been very stereotypical. It could have been very like just everything could have been misrepresented, and it could have been a hodgepodge of just nonsense. But the fact that they brought natives on board and the Choctaw Nation and really worked with them to develop the story, to develop the character, to develop the symbology and the communities that are shown in this, it created something that is very real. Like, and as watching it, like as a native person, you know, you don't have to be Choctaw to watch this to understand that community and the relationship between the different characters.
Right.
Um, like at the beginning, it was about, they kind of showed these flashbacks of Maya and her cousin Bonnie as children, and that closeness of them being like sisters, and that's very much how native communities are. Like with your cousins, like we don't really consider them like cousins, we consider them as we would our brothers and sisters. um so to see that relationship being portrayed that way, and that closeness, and even with her mom and her dad, just was very real.
Yeah.
And like it's amazing to see that, because this could have gone so wrong, but yet it worked. And like I wish it had gotten a little more care in the rollout, um,
Right.
just a little more help, because it's such a beautiful show. Um, and Hawkeye, Hawkeye was the same way. I wish they would have given that a little more care and a little more push, um, because it's such a phenomenal show.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like that, these two shows are weirdly like just, I don't know, they don't get talked about enough. I think they're just because they're more the street level. They're not as
Yeah,
fantastical. So
exactly.
I get that most people are looking for superpowers and stuff like that. But like that's part of what I like about it really is that there is, see, I'm also a crime guy. I love crime fiction when it's done well. And I feel like this one's done really well where it's really um and I mean there's not a lot of it going on, but there's just enough of it going on in it that it keeps you interested. And that's what's really fun about it is that it's very grounded, very like even when we get the powers and everything like that towards the end of the series, that it's just it's there, but it's not overused. And it's used just the right amount. Which is something I do want to talk about too, because in the comic books, her powers are much different. She's a much different character. Not only is her obviously her native heritage different, but her powers in the comic books is that she is a person who can copy anybody's movements. That's why she's Echo. She can echo people's movements. She's very much like the comic book version of Taskmaster in that way. So I can see why they were like, let's do something a little bit different with her in this series rather than in the MCU, rather than doing something that visually probably isn't as interesting, I guess. And plus, they were already going to have Taskmaster in the MCU, even though that's a whole bag of worms I don't want to get into right now. Because it's just a weird character depiction. But I think that, and not because she's a woman, because I don't care. Like that part, I think is awesome. I love that they gender swapped it. It just, the rest of it is just weird. The character's so much more dynamic than how they've had it. So I'm hoping that Thunderbolts changes that. But we'll see.
Yeah, and I agree. Like when they first said that they were changing her powers,
yeah.
I was like, why? Again,
Right.
it was like with changing the tribe, right? You're like,
Yeah.
why? It seems like such a weird thing to do. And especially because they had already kind of set it up in Hawkeye that she had the same powers that she was in the comic books. Like
Right.
that she had that power to mimic, and
Yeah.
they kind of set that up in Hawkeye, and they didn't do it like explicitly, right?
Right.
It was there, and
I just don't
because
think I don't think when they had her in Hawkeye that they really knew what they were going to do with her quite
exactly,
yet, and so they didn't have her do anything yet. They were like, well,
yeah, like
she'll be very physical, but beyond that, we're not going to explain anything just yet because we want to
yeah,
maybe
and they're just
do
like,
something else.
people know this character from the comic, so they'll just infer whatever they want to infer to say
Exactly.
otherwise.
We'll just let the
Yeah,
audience
so
figure it out.
exactly. So like, before the show came out, I was like, why? And I was really like hesitant, like, well, what do you mean you're changing her powers? What are you
Right.
changing them to? Like, what does this mean? And I do like how they kind of kept it the same a little bit, just
Kind
with
of. Yeah.
different context, because instead
Yeah.
of like mimicking the actions, and that her being the echo, you know, in this context, it was more like
Mm,
ancestors were echoing through her.
right. And giving her the abilities that they have as well.
Exactly. And
So,
I thought that was really cool.
yeah.
Because especially like when they're going through the story, like they're showing the flashbacks as she's like
Yes.
learning these powers. And to see like all of these women, especially because there is a very real history to some of these
Hmm.
women in the Choctaw Nation. To see that was really amazing because we don't learn those histories.
Right.
Um, and so for them to be able to bring them to the forefront in this way, to show that there were these badass Choctaw women who were warriors in every respect, who through all of these different time periods of her like her lineage, played a huge part in the Choctaw history.
Right.
I thought that was really cool. And empowering for a lot of like Native women, because when we're shown in film, we're always the victim. It is rare Native
Yeah.
women get to not only survive a film, but that we get to actually live or be happy, or
Yeah.
to have a good
Become the
outcome of
hero
any
or anything like that. Yeah.
exactly. Like it's always bad.
Yeah.
So to show them, to have them have this line of, and yeah, they all had, they all were, it showed them, dying and stuff, which is just a part of life, right? Like we all
Right.
have to go sometime. And, to see the circumstances in which, they were killed, even kind of just added to that,
Right.
to kind of like learn from this, learn from our mistake, or learn from what we might have missed in this moment. um pay attention, which is what they kept telling her, like, pay attention,
Right.
because things aren't the way that you think they are. And like, there's a lot more to you than you think there is. And, even with the grandma, she kept telling Echo, like, trying to make her see that there was more to her than just what she thought she was.
Right.
And so, to kind of see that was kind of cool. I really liked the way that they showed it. It worked. But like but I was still like, I'm still skeptical on that, because like, at some point you're going to run out of ancestors.
Right, right. Well,
Which,
I mean, I'm assuming that she'll be able to call on those same ancestors anytime she needs those abilities. So it's not like
yeah, and
it's not like she's gonna like she can't call on them again. Like,
yeah,
and I
and
don't
you
even think
see,
it's like a calling on them thing. It's
no,
just
it's
literally their
almost like,
abilities flow through to her.
yes,
So,
exactly. Which brings us to the finale, right? Like, when she had, like, all her relatives were there with with Bonnie and the grandma, and they were able to kind of channel that energy through all
yeah,
of them. That was incredible. And and it was something that we talk a lot about as Native women, is like, we're like, for the most part, we're always shown in the background as being very subservient. But when you look at the real history and even look at current movements, it's always Native women who are first on the front lines, the first one
yeah,
raising the flags, the first one standing up, speaking out, the first ones taking on all the huge risks, and the first ones to kind of fight back. And, I really love that they had this throughout Echo,
right,
of just how strong Native women were, that they weren't willing to just be the victim, that they would fight back, that they were outspoken, um, that they weren't afraid to get involved. So
right.
I really love that. But I'm still, I kind of wish they would have kept to the comic book a little bit more in regards
Yeah,
to powers, because it did bring something a little more unique, especially because because she's deaf. um
right,
it kind of it kind of plays into the idea that if you lose one sense, something else gets a little bit stronger, which,
right.
like, we look at Daredevil,
Yeah,
he lost his sight, but his other senses became a little more enhanced, and, he gained a different ability. And I kind of saw that with Maya, right?
right, exactly.
Like, she could
No,
move.
and I think that's what made her a great counterpoint for Daredevil in the comic books and stuff. And I think that because they went in that, in because they introduced her in Hawkeye and they had her in her own show before she even really deals very much with Daredevil. I think that was kind of one of those things. And I think again, it's one of those things where they didn't want to have too many people sharing too many similar superpowers, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but I like, yeah, I still feel like they could have done it in that way. And I still feel like they could possibly kind of fold that into her echo ability as it is now. It just, it's something that could be expanded upon as time goes on, as we get hopefully more with the character. And I do hope we get more with her. I'd love to see her pop up in more, especially maybe in Daredevil. Um,
Yes, I
but
am still dying for that storyline to continue,
yeah,
because their chemistry, oh my goodness, like I said with that fight scene,
yeah.
like,
It
come on, we
it
gotta
it
have
was
more
better
of
than
them.
the Daredevil Elektra fight scene in the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie.
Yes. Oh, like, and it was so
And everybody
good
should understand
because
that as a joke because
I
that was
know
terrible before.
exactly. It's like, if you don't get that joke, there's something wrong with you.
Right, right. Please get that joke. I don't want to have to explain it. Um,
And please watch this fight to know the difference.
yes, exactly. But this is I wanted to get back to what you were saying too, and about how Native women have been portrayed and stuff like that. And I think that's largely because it's mostly been white people who've been writing them, and not understanding the culture of women in Native history. Because I've always, and I could be wrong, and it could be, it may be specific to individual tribes, but from what I've understood is that the most native cultures are very matriarchal, um, or at least, co-equal. Whereas the women aren't, relegated to just being solely, gatherers and mothers and such like that, that they have been warriors and such. And I feel like that's what the show is trying to show too, was that, the first Choctaw people, it was a woman who led them. And then, in the stickball one, it was this woman who was, the standout player of everybody. And then, the light horseman one was, she was very accomplished, even though her father was trying to hold her back. And, and it was just like, at that point, it was like maybe the changing times were trying to, like, he was trying to say that, because he even says, women should be giving life, not taking life. Um, and so I thought that was interesting, that they really kind of highlighted that. And, tell me if I'm wrong. But that's what it felt like. They were just kind of highlight. Look, Native women are powerful. They are doing this stuff, and that it's something that in our history, that at least in the history of media, that they've been misportraying.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and it's really hard for people to kind of see that because like in other cultures, women were really subjugated, but in native
Hmm.
cultures, we didn't really have that same hierarchy, and people don't really understand the difference either, right? Like,
Right.
sure, we had male leadership in certain ways, but that it wasn't the same as what we're seeing now. Like there wasn't
Right.
necessarily like a patriarchy or a matriarchy in a sense. We were very matriarchal, but that all that really meant was that men and women held equal station. Like
Right.
they weren't seen as less than or less powerful. Um, and there really was no just strictly male or female roles, right?
Right.
Because, when it all came down to it, I mean, it's literally like all hands on deck. And sure, like
Yeah.
did more of the hunting or something, but women were able to do that too. Um, and like you see that with in Echo, you see them taking on these roles, and you know and a lot of people kind of, if you have to understand the history a little bit too, because like with um for example, Tucklow, who was the sharpshooter in
Yeah.
Echo, um they were that history. We had what was called the light horsemen,
Right.
and they were kind of like tribal police forces, right? And that's what she was kind of aspiring to be. And they are like, they were typically men. And, her dad wanted something different for her
Right.
because he knew it was like a violent, dangerous situation. And people don't really understand that dynamic because they're just thinking, well, he didn't want her to do this because, she was a woman. And it wasn't necessarily that he didn't want her to do it because she was a woman. He just wanted something different for her, something
Right.
safer. And it, because like when it came down to it, she took on that role and he was just right there having her back in it. Um, but I mean, it's kind of like those misconceptions, like with Prey. So I was Prey's biggest hater. Um, as soon as rumors came out that it was in development, just the way that they were talking about it, Comanche girl goes against tribe to become warrior. That's what set my little spider senses off. And I
Right.
was, oh, heck no. Because at the time, I was living in the Comanche Nation. I lived in Lawton, Oklahoma. And if there's one thing about Comanche women that any Native woman knows, is you don't mess with Comanche women. They are fierce. They are just natural warriors. And so that portrayal, or the way that they were talking about that portrayal, just rubbed me the wrong way, because there's no Comanche woman who would have to go against her tribe to be a warrior.
Right.
Uh, And that just kind of really rubbed me the wrong way because it also turns like it's also making it seem like we are turning our own people into our enemies, to do something that we want to do, that they're telling us we can't do. And that's just not the way that things work, and not the way that our kinship systems work. And so that really rubbed me the wrong way. So I was the biggest hater, right? And then, and I was so skeptical of it until, I started realizing that they were collaborating with the Comanche Nation on this story, that they changed a lot of things,
Right.
and that it became what it became. Um, and that made a huge difference because Comanche women are fierce and they were warriors. And historically, Native women were warriors in any
Yeah.
kind of battle in history. Like we may not be in like the non-Native written books, but when you hear like in Native communities, when they're doing our history, we have these women who were fierce, who did accomplish great things, especially in the Battle of Little Bighorn. It was a Native woman who killed Custer.
Mm.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
But we were always warriors. So it's really good to see that history kind of being shown in various ways and to have Native women being empowered and to um, kind of turn those narratives on their heads a little bit because it's so tiring, I think, as a Native woman to constantly be portrayed as weak or as lesser than or to be subjugated. And I complain about it all the time in a lot of the social justice work that I do, in trying to get people to understand that there's a different power dynamic in Native communities. Like when we say we're matriarchal, a lot of times what that means is we're matrilineal,
Right.
that the bloodline goes through the Native women. But there really wasn't like women didn't have more power than men. Men didn't have more power than women.
Right.
We held equal station and our input was just as needed as the male input, because we needed each other, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the way it should be. Like
Yeah,
this,
I wish people would learn from that.
yeah, exactly, right? So, when these shows happen, sometimes they always try to put these Western perspectives
Yes.
into them, and it never really sits well with me. So I was
Yeah.
really happy to see that they didn't do that with Echo, that they didn't do that with Prey,
Yeah. Well,
because
and
it's.
that's go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say because it's such a downer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's something that was interesting for this show as well too, is that when you see all the women characters, you've got Echo, you've got Bonnie, you've got Chula, that they are all working jobs that, Bonnie's an EMT and Chula's a postal worker and stuff like that. Not that there aren't women in both of those jobs too, but those are jobs that typically would go to like men on TV shows and stuff like that. And meanwhile, um, um, oh my gosh, I forgot his name. Scully is, the he runs a pawn shop, and Biscuits is just,
Is Biscuit.
basically kind of like yeah, he's just Biscuits. He's a ne'er-do-well. And then just so it was just interesting to see it kind of like, I don't know, the more physical kind of jobs were by the women, and the more like, the shop job was by the guy and everything like that. Not that you don't see that plenty of times, or you see plenty of men working in shops, especially pawn shops. It's almost always like a dude in a pawn shop. But it was just like, I don't know, it was just interesting to see those dynamics kind of flipped if you're paying attention to that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is one of those things that most people probably didn't get when they're watching it, and to see how because like Chula, she's like, very well respected in the community. She's one of the heads of, the people trying to get this powwow going and everything. And so it was just, meanwhile, Scully's just, hanging in his pawn shop, so, he's just keeping his head down. And so I thought that was interesting that, and that aspect of it was really fun and fascinating to watch, especially this time. Like I said, this last time was more of a, um, more enjoyable than the last time. Not that the last time was unenjoyable at all. But I don't know. I just like things started connecting just even better for me with that in terms of um those relationships as well.
Yeah, and you kind of have to do like, I'm a media critic. So when I watch something for the first time, it
Yeah,
has
exactly.
for my initial reaction to things. And also, just because usually I have to do like a critique right away,
Right.
it's trying to pick out all these nitpick things, right?
Right.
So it takes me a couple, like, I'll watch it a second time, right? And I'll watch it the second time just trying to ignore, the things like critics and things that I
Right.
think and just watch it. Um, just to kind of get the story, to get the characters, and then I'll watch it a third time. And by the third time, that watch is where you realize, like, oh, I actually enjoy this, or you don't
Right.
enjoy it,
Exactly. And that's what I've told people too, is that sometimes like if you watch something and you don't connect with it the first time, unless you absolutely hated it that first time, because sometimes there is something that it just like there will be a movie or TV show that you just absolutely hate, and that's fine. It didn't connect with you at all. Don't rewatch it. It's not worth it. But if you watch something and it didn't connect with you, but you didn't hate it, go back, like give it some time, and then go back and rewatch it again a second time, maybe a third time, and see if that changes for you. Because it's something I've noticed with myself is that there's been stuff that I was just really soft on. It was just like, it's okay, but I don't love it. And then I'll go back that second time and either it'll reconfirm that for me and I'll just be like, yeah, this just isn't really for me. Or I'll pick up on things and I'll enjoy it a little bit more. And that's what I love about doing that is like, and that's what I try to suggest to people all the time is don't just let the one viewing be your one if you were just kind of met on it. If you hated it, fuck yeah, don't go back to it. But if you just were soft on it, go back, rewatch it. It might actually be okay. So
Yeah, and also I think a lot of times too, I think we go in with our expectations
yes.
set. Like we go into it with the mindset we're going to hate it. We go into the mindset with we're going to love it, right?
Right.
And depending on what mindset you go into it with, you're going to be sorely disappointed
Yeah.
or you're going to be thrilled. And, and it kind of like, and if you don't love it, right? If there's, especially if it's something you're not familiar with, which, things like Echo, Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, all of these shows that are by Native creatives, um, I think people need to be a little more lenient with during that first watch
Yeah.
because it's not necessarily going to resonate with you right away because you're unfamiliar with Native communities and with our real histories. And so it's going to be very kind of jarring in a way because even our storytelling, the way that we communicate, the way that we talk, and the relationships that we have with each other are sometimes very different.
Right.
Um, like I said, like there's a blend of humor and drama in this. And, humor for a lot of natives is kind of like a coping mechanism. And so, it's people are always a little confused because they're like, well, I don't understand why they're joking in this situation or why they're laughing. And it's because, well, that's a coping mechanism when natives are uncomfortable with the situation or it's not something that we're familiar with. Well, how do we make ourselves comfortable in that position? We joke about it. Like when you watch native horror films, even um, they're very different, and a lot of people don't recognize them as horror films because whereas in mainstream horror films, there's a lot of death, a lot of mayhem and stuff, but in a lot of native horror films, it's rooted in more like historical trauma. Like the
Right.
boogeyman isn't an actual boogeyman. It's the real people that we're dealing with and the spirits or the monsters that are there in this world um, are there as a result of the evil being done by the very real people,
Right. Yeah.
And there's not usually like a huge kill count because, the whole point of a lot of like native storytelling is for you to be able to realize what you're doing wrong and to correct course, to make amends, to fix it, and to learn from it, to grow from it, right? So there's not always like a huge kill count. um so a lot of people watching like native horror films or any kind of native media, sometimes it just doesn't really connect because they're not familiar enough with like the history or the dynamics that we have, um, for them to really resonate or for them to get it. So sometimes it's taking that first watch and realizing like, okay, what don't I understand here?
Right.
And taking note of that. And then, like you said, giving it a little time, let it sit with you, and then go back and watch it again.
Right.
Uh, and read like what native people are saying about this show or
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
because we explain a lot of it, like we break things down,
Yeah.
so people understand like maybe like some of this history. That's why the Choctaw Nation has this separate section for Echo on their website, so people can learn about the history, the symbology, and to kind of delve into it a little bit more, and then go back and watch it and be like, oh, okay, I get it now. That makes sense. I see why that's there now.
Right.
Understand this character. Um, but it's just kind of like, there's a learning curve when it comes to native media, I feel, because it's
Yeah.
like
I think
this is
it's
the first time like we're getting some mainstream notice.
Yeah, I think that's like just for any non any non-white like mainstream stuff like that. If you're going to look at any culture, you need to understand that anything that's outside of the narrative that Hollywood has mostly pushed for 100 plus years, you're going to be kind of in the deep end. And you're going to need to understand that those movies and shows aren't going to necessarily align with what you know. And part of that is definitely on you as a viewer to um, go, okay, well, this story I might not understand this story, but maybe if I go read something and understand more about the culture and everything like that, I'll understand the some of the deeper meanings behind things, and understand things on a level that will hopefully help with that. And I mean, that's just again, that's just I think that's necessary for anything. Like I think that just makes us all better, more empathic people, that empathetic people, that we just need to understand and learn more about each other rather than try to shut each other out. And just be like, oh well, I'm gonna close off and just be like, no, I want all my stuff white, and same as usual, because it's I don't know, that's boring. It just makes everything a boring gray blob. And I'd rather have a world full of color and uniqueness, and all these different cultures touching each other and finding those similarities within those cultures to cross over, and to connect, rather than
Exactly.
trying to bring up all these walls between each other that everybody's trying to do. And I don't want to get too political or anything, but it's
Yeah.
just but I mean just in terms of media as well, because you see it just in terms of that, it's just, and that's what I think is great about Echo and Prey and Reservation Dogs, and lots of these things that are coming out now. Suddenly, like, there's this whole like media stuff, and there's like this show that I watched that only lasted like, I don't even think it lasted a full season, called Stumptown, that Tentu Cardinal was on as well, where she played like a fucking like crime boss on that, and she was great in that. And it's it's just, there's all these, like, that's why I think is fascinating about this is just like the where these cultures differ, and then where they connect, and then where they connect is that moment where it makes that story deeper. I mean, it's just, even with Echo and, well, Maya and Fisk, the fact that they do have this relationship across the divide of their cultures. They and part of that's because she grew up with him being her quote unquote uncle. But also just because it's something that is a part of her life, and she does care for him even when she hates him, which is family. I mean, so it's just, I don't know. I love that what this show specifically is talking about as well. So
Yeah, and and I agree with you because you know, I'm Native, and so growing up, I I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Uh, and I always felt very comfortable within the Star Wars fandom. And I used to brag about it, right? Because for me, um, I credit the Star Wars fandom with like my survival. I'm a suicide survivor, and because of that, I always felt very disconnected from my peers when I was younger. Like I didn't feel normal. I didn't feel like I belonged. Um, and even like, like I had my friends and stuff, but that experience othered me. And made me feel like, okay, I'm not like I'm here, but I'm not really here.
right.
And it was the Star Wars fandom, like conventions and, just going to the comic book store. And, if you're wearing a Star Wars shirt and you come across somebody else who loves Star Wars, you bond over that t-shirt.
Yeah.
And then you start nerding out about other things about Star Wars. And, you go to conventions and it's people from all different ages, all different walks of life, that just love this fandom. And that was the one place where I truly felt like I belonged. Like I felt like myself, like no one was judging me, no one, like no one, just thought I was weird because I was into Star Wars. I just belonged, and you just
Right.
have Star Wars. And so I credit that with the my survival. And like in being part of all these different fandoms, it keeps me connected and grounded in a lot of ways. And I think the one thing that people fail to see, because especially now, there's especially in the last 10 years or so, anytime there's a Star Wars project and there's a female character, um,
Yes. I'm a
or
big
a
Star Wars
person of
fan, so
color being brought into
I
this
know all
world.
about this. Yeah.
Yeah, or even Lord of the Rings, like
Yes. Oh my God.
somehow having a black elf is just the worst thing in the world. And you're just like, seriously? Like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Because, these worlds have always been, to me, inclusive in various ways.
And
Like, I
and
could
largely
read
speaking, they were always intended to be inclusive,
exactly. Like,
So
I could read Lord of the Rings and see myself as a hobbit
right.
because they're very similar to who I am as a person. And to who I know like my relatives to be, right? So
Right.
I could see us in the Hobbit world. I could see us in the Star Wars universe in various ways. And I actually teach Star Wars indigenous representation within the Star Wars universe.
That's awesome.
So and like I could see myself in all these different fandoms. They were always inclusive. So this idea that, that they're not supposed to be, or that this character is out of place, or this person shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
The hate that John Boyega got, and even Rose,
Yeah.
just didn't make sense to me. And at the heart of it, you really can say it's not the fandom. These are infiltrators because
Yes.
there really are just chaos agents who come into these spaces because once you start talking to them, they don't know beans,
They
right?
don't know anything. Yeah, no. Often than not, these are people who claim to be fans, who have come into the property and don't know much. And they're even like, and this is something. I mean, this is something we've because there's definitely the hardcore nerds that are like super hardcore about Marvel, Star Wars, whatever, and and the people who are just really knowledgeable. My son is really knowledgeable about Star Wars. He's a second generation fan because I was a huge I've always been a huge Star Wars person. But so and he grew up with the prequel trilogy. That's his trilogy. And that generation, they love the prequel trilogy. I don't understand it. It's not that great. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna die on the hill. The original trilogy is the best. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I love all of Star Wars. But this is the thing that I've always said about Star Wars too, because then people bitch about well, Star Wars sucks and blah 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 this and everything else like that. And it's Star Wars has always been a very wonky franchise.
Yeah, it's
They
always been hit
there's
or
a lot
miss.
of terrible stuff in the franchise. The holiday special, the Ewok adventures. There's things in there that we all try to kind of ignore. But and each of us ignores different things. Some people really love the holiday special. I don't know why. But it's but when you get these people who come in who are obviously hateful just to be hateful, and they really have no real knowledge of anything, and it's so easy to catch them in things and everything like that. But I mean, that's besides the point. Just we don't need that kind of hate in any of this stuff, because these franchises were always meant to be inclusive. Just because they may have started out seemingly being very white doesn't mean that's how they were meant to be. And that's the thing that I think is the mistake in large part, is because these people who see themselves in these characters, who in this universe, and trying to claim ownership of it, they're wrong, and they should be pointed out
Exactly.
and always made fun of. So
Exactly. And it's also that idea too, right? Because it's like when you read a book and then they turn it into a movie, there's always a lot of like controversy
oh
about
yeah,
who's cast in this role or whatever. Because when we read something, we read it through our frame or our perspective, our lens of the world. And so we put ourselves in those characters.
exactly.
And so, like, I feel like with white people, they're the default. And so,
Yeah,
whenever they read a book, they just assume that this character is white because that's the default for them, right? And even for us as people of color, unless we know that writer is a person of color, or we know that this character, because they explicitly say that this character is this, we automatically assume that a lot of those characters are white too, because
yeah, because
we
it's
know
the
that's the
default.
baseline.
It's like
Ex-
literally default for everything in popular culture, at least for the 20th century,
yeah,
if not
and
beyond that.
things have changed now. And
Yes,
and yeah, like I'm sure it's jarring for a lot of white people to realize, like,
it's
oh, we're
honestly,
not the center of the
yeah,
world. There are other people here, and they are the
it's
star of
just
the
a very
show this
hateful
year.
minority that's very vocal.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And but I kind of get it too, because when something has been your default and
Yeah,
something challenges your worldview, it doesn't matter what that worldview is, it is going to be very uncomfortable. And
sure, but you have
because
to.
because you
Sorry, go
have to
ahead.
realize, like, this is my worldview. And you're like, oh, this isn't the way things are, right? Like,
Right.
and it does make you it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. And it should make you uncomfortable
Exactly. Well, and
because
that's the
that's
thing
how we
too.
grow and that's how we change.
Yeah.
And we realize, like, oh, things could be better, or it doesn't have to be this way. But I feel like so much of a lot of these misconceptions that we have about each other as people, and a lot of this, like, anger and jealousy and just all of these things that kind of keep us divided. A lot of that is because we don't have close proximity with each other.
Yes.
We don't communicate with each other like on a daily basis, or in, you know,
We
the
don't
same
see that we
capacity.
actually have a lot in a lot in
Yeah, our
common, and a very,
similarities,
yeah.
because we've been told for so long that these are the things that keep us separate. And
Yes.
so we have a hard time seeing those similarities. And that's what I really love about, like, a lot of Native media, because they're really trying to bridge that, to show that, hey, Native people are still here, but also that we are a lot like you.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen the show Rutherford Falls,
I
but it
haven't
has
yet.
Ed
No.
Helms.
Right.
And
I've
it's on
heard of
it's
it. I
on
just haven't seen
Peacock.
it. Yeah.
You have to watch it. I highly recommend this show for
All right.
everyone, because it's about two best friends. One is white, one is native, and they both have museums. And
Okay.
one is he's trying to uphold the heritage of his family, who's the founder of the town. And the native has a small cultural museum that doesn't get the same funding or attention that her best friend's museum does. And, even him, he doesn't always see, that when he's complaining about some of the things that are happening, he doesn't realize the privilege that he has, right? So
Right.
it's kind of like bridging those divides in a very funny way and showing that it is possible for us to coexist and to support each other in different capacities. Um, but it's so funny because of these relationships, and
Yeah.
it's because it's showing that we do have a lot more in common than differences, and that we're all human beings. So we are going to be fallible. Like, we're not perfect. And we shouldn't put each other on pedestals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's kind of like where we have this power dynamic now between all of us. Like, people get put on a pedestal as, oh, they're better because of this, or they're superior or whatever, and these people are inferior. um but I think a lot of it's just because we don't have enough proximity. So I
Yeah.
love media. I love shows like Star Wars. I love these fandoms. I love shows like Echo, because they really do bridge that divide when they're showing all of these different types of people, all these different types of communities that exist.
Right.
um because it's getting us familiar with each other, because we are starting to be a little more connected, like through social media. Like, we have access to each other now, um
Yes.
and we
And
can
that's what's
hear each
that's
other.
what's so frustrating is that the internet was supposed to bring us all together. Um and supposed to like finally like show like everybody that we don't have all these differences. That we do have a lot of differences, but those differences aren't so big that we should be still hating on each other, that the commonalities between all of us should be uniting us more than anything. um and so it's just, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's so frustrating to see it being used the way it is. And again, it goes into more political things than I really want to get into in this in on this show.
Yeah.
But just know that, yeah, it's just, yeah, it's just yeah. But getting back to, how this all connects to Echo, is just that that's what makes Echo so great, is that it does have all these themes in it. um that this is kind of how we got to this point, is that because of what Echo was saying in this, not just about her as a character and her world and everything like that, it's about everything that it involves as well, with Kingpin and everything. And it's just, I don't know, it's such a great show. And I really think that if you haven't seen it yet, you really owe it to yourself to go see it. It's only 5 episodes. Like you mentioned earlier, it was supposed to originally be 6 episodes, but they you know, underfunded it and made it 5 episodes instead. Which, I mean, it still turned out really well, in my opinion. I think that what they made of it, what they accomplished with it, is very well done. And I think more people need to watch it and watch Hawkeye and Echo back to back and just immerse yourself in that world of Maya Lopez. And it's so good. It's so fun.
It's such an amazing show. I think my favorite thing too, I think about Echo, is just just how fierce she gets to be. I mean, it's amazing. Like, sure, we've had like Black Widow, we've had a lot of strong female
Right.
leads from comic books and stuff, but not like Maya Lopez. Um, in the regard that, her first reaction is to punch first, ask questions later. And
Right.
I really love that about her. And I think that's what makes Echo so fun too, is just that she's a reactor. Like, she's not sitting back and waiting. She just jumps head first, sometimes without thinking it through completely. But it's such an amazing show because of that. Just her
Right.
fierceness, the toughness, but also that softness too. And the
Yeah.
cleverness, right? Because, so many times when you see a lot of female characters, they're written to where they just innately know something.
Right.
Um, and it doesn't really make sense, because it's almost like they don't earn that power.
Right.
Or they don't appreciate it, right? Because they didn't earn it. And there's a smugness to them. Captain Marvel is my big example of this.
Oh, okay.
I love the movie. I don't necessarily love the character because there is such a smugness to her that I didn't like. Um,
Are you talking about like in the comic book version of
in
her?
the movies,
Oh, okay.
just there was a smugness. And, when,
I
especially
think
when you
I think
see
in the
her,
first movie for sure. I think in the second
yes.
movie there's a
And
softening of
there
her.
was
So
exactly, there was that softening. And I was like, okay, I like this a lot better.
yeah. I love the Marvels. I think the Marvels is a much more
Oh, the
accomplished movie than the
Marvels, yes.
than
Oh
Captain
my
than the
gosh.
original Captain Marvel movie. Yeah.
We need to do an episode on that because
I just did an episode with Ashley from podcast
oh, that
616.
is
So, yeah.
amazing. Because
So
talk
because
about
she
a show you can gush about.
oh
That
yeah.
was so fun.
Oh, I love that
Um,
movie so much.
yeah, I didn't think I would like it, but it was such a fun movie. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, right? Because I think a lot of people too come into comic book movies and expect seriousness or expect them to
Yes.
be like these like award-winning blockbuster films or whatever, but
Right.
they're comic book films and you should
Yes.
expect fun. Like they should be fun. And that's the other thing with Echo that I really enjoyed was that it was a fun series.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very fun. I think that's what's it's very serious, but it's got a lot of fun. It's got a lot of funny parts to it. It balances everything very well.
Exactly. Like it's
Yeah.
such a good balanced show. Like the action is there, the story is there, the everything's there.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's really hard even as a critic. Like, yeah, it was a little choppy, but I
Sure.
understand what they had to do. And because of that, I'm like, what they still came out with is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And it works. Like sure, I wish they would have had those extra episodes and stuff to really kind of flesh it out a little more, but I really love this series and I think
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I think everybody should watch this show and maybe watch it twice if it doesn't connect the first time
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah,
it
like again, unless you absolutely hated it for whatever reason, that and obviously not from a oh she's a woman and she's Native American, get over yourself.
yeah.
If that's the reason why you hate it, go away. Just go bury yourself in a box. But but if it just doesn't connect with you or whatever, fine. Yeah, I get it. Don't watch it
Yeah,
again.
then
But
yeah,
if you just come away from it and you because I'll admit the first time I liked it, but I didn't like love it. This time I enjoyed it a lot more. So I'll admit that just that first time I was like, okay, this is okay. This is pretty good. But this time I was like, wow, this is actually really, really good. So
yeah, and there are shows like I'm a comfort watcher too. So
I
if
wish I
there's
could
this,
be.
like there are shows that I've watched numerous times, and Echo's one of those shows. Like it's
Oh
just a
yeah.
comfort show for me. Like I like watching it. I've enjoyed it every single time I watch it. So sometimes I'll just put it on. I've seen Prey, I don't know how many times because it's a comfort movie.
You're right.
Fanboys, and like there's certain movies that are
I
comforting.
saw that. I saw that on your social media, how big of a fan you were of Fanboys. I was like, wow, that's an interesting movie to be a huge fan of.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, it's because of, I kind of resonate. It's
Yeah.
about, friends kind of bonding over Star Wars for like, and there's a deeper meaning to it, just
Yeah,
about like
exactly.
of how it impacts actual friendships and lives and stuff. So like I resonated with that. And the part where he says, you got to find your Death Star, you
Yeah.
know, that hits hard. Honestly, and it's kind of funny because if people were asking me, like I would say that Fanboys is my favorite over the Star Wars franchise,
Oh,
just because of that.
bold,
I
bold
think it,
statements being made here on the podcast.
yes, and because it captured the fandom, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's just
It
so
really
many.
did. It captured the fandom at that moment in time, like definitely like what it was like. Because I was there when like Phantom Menace was coming out, like because that's what the movie's it's surrounded by that moment in time when Phantom Menace was going to come
Yes.
out and everything.
And this is going to
Um,
be so embarrassing to admit and to have out in the world
do it.
because I was living in a very small rural community. And me and my brother for episode 1 camped out for a week
Oh
at the
wow.
little bitty theater.
I definitely waited outside with
Dressed
a
up.
huge crowd of people. I didn't wait a week. I just was there for a few hours on the day they were selling tickets, but there were a lot of us. I will tell you that when Attack of the Clones came out, nobody did that. That
Yeah.
was
Oh
just for
my
Phantom
gosh.
Menace.
Yes. It was so like I feel so bad admitting this, but me and my brother were dressed up. We camped out for a week at our theater, and like people
Wow.
at the theater thought we were just like nuts because they're like, you guys are the only ones. Like, what are
Now, I
you
will say, like,
doing?
people were dressing up for future movies. I've seen people dressing up for like
Oh yeah.
every installment since then.
Yeah. And
Um,
you know, like,
but
and I
yeah,
grew up, like, I have no qualms about cosplay and stuff, but
no,
here's the thing is like we invested so much into episode one, right? Like I was super excited, and I was super excited that I got to share this with my brother. Because me and my brother, oh my gosh, we have camped out for Star Wars, for Lord of the Rings, and we've seen Lord of the Rings an insane number of times at the theater. But episode one was just so embarrassing, right? Because watching fanboys and that line when the movie's getting ready to start, and he's like, hey guys, what if the movie sucks? That hit hard, right?
yes,
because,
yes.
because we all know at that time, yeah, yes, it did suck for some of us.
For some of us, you know,
And some of
my
us
son still
dressed up
defends
and
that
camped.
movie. So
Oh yeah, like I laugh at it all the time because I'm like, what were we thinking? We were in a small town, and even when the movie came out, right,
yeah,
there was not a huge line.
yeah.
And people were showing up, and we're still there with our tent, and they're just like, what in the world? Um, but it was so like in retrospect, it's embarrassing, but
Right.
because that was for episode
But
one.
you know what? I mean, I think that's what makes it fun though too, is like when you can embrace something so much in that way. And
Yeah.
that's where I get back to what we were saying earlier about the asshole fans who are tearing things apart and making things worse right now. When we were out there with people, I was standing in line with people, and we were all just having a great time. Those were the true fans, the people who were out there, just having a great time. Even if the movie was
Even if
gonna
the movie,
suck,
yeah, exactly.
we still were out there having a good time, supporting something that we loved and having a great time with the community of other people who loved it just as much as we did.
Exactly. And you don't stop loving it just because something sucks.
Yeah, exactly. I
I
still love
mean,
Star
if
Wars. I'm
if that
excited for
was the
Andor season
case,
2.
yeah, like if that was the case, right? Like Predator would have only had one movie.
True.
You know, like come on, let's be honest, people.
That
But
first movie didn't do well originally. So I mean, yeah, no,
yeah,
that movie wouldn't have done
exactly.
well. Yeah,
Yeah,
thankfully
but we still got
video made it come
sequels.
back.
Yeah, and it's because like things resonate with us in different ways. We bond as fans, and
Exactly.
like with Star Wars, there's so many things that it's hard to keep up now. Um, and it's really easy to critique things because you're just like, did this really have to exist?
Sure.
Um,
But I argue,
but
yeah,
it's
sure it
still,
did.
yeah,
Because I
because right, it's
gave me
part of this
entertainment.
universe, and
Yeah.
it's a vast universe that you can explore. And because surely, there had to have been more going on. And obviously there was, we're seeing Andor, we're seeing The Mandalorian, all of these different things that were happening sometimes, at the same time, which is cool. Um, but it all connects everything, and it keeps this world alive for like newer generations because like you said, what resonated with us doesn't necessarily resonate with them, but something that is more now does,
Right.
or more recent. And and I find myself like Mandalorian is another show that I really love talking about because of the indigenous representation that's kind of like sneakily hidden in there.
Right.
um, and it's so fun to watch things, and I think that, when I'm watching like MCU, MCU is like Star Wars. It's just so vast, and we're starting
Right.
to see them spin off into all these different stories, bringing all these different characters that necessarily wouldn't have gotten a movie or a show like ever. um,
Exactly.
and we're starting to get them seen brought to life, and sometimes the way that they're brought to life is it works now. um like I mean, I'm a huge fan of Marvel more than DC, but I have a soft spot for Blue Beetle.
Oh, I
After the
love the Blue Beetle movie. That's a
I
great movie. That's
yes,
one of my favorites of the whole DC movie stuff.
exactly.
I'm a huge Marvel fan, but
I
have
was
been
getting ready
keeping an
to
eye on
write
it.
them off because everything I haven't really liked anything
Yeah.
DC.
And then they
Like
brought
they've
out Blue Beetle, and I was like, this is the fucking movie that we should have had all along.
exactly. And again, it was one of the movies that didn't get the push. You know, it came out at such a weird time, like it was
Yeah.
just right after the
But it
strikes
already
and
one, it already been announced that the DCU was changing and that Blue Beetle was like basically the
yes.
last of these movies. And, and they were just like, we're just writing off and everything. I'm like, please let them bring this back into the main, like in the new
I
DCU.
know.
Because I think this movie was so good. I mean, we're getting way off topic,
I know it was so well
but
done.
yeah.
And not because and also because, I might be a little biased here too, because one of my t-shirts that I designed is in Blue Beetle. Um
Okay.
it's the t-shirt that George Lopez is wearing when he makes his first appearance in the movie.
Oh, that's
When
awesome.
he pulls up in the truck at
The
the
taco.
airport.
Yes.
Yep, that he's wearing my shirt.
That's so cool. I'll have to rewatch that again. Speaking of comfort shows and stuff like that. I have comfort movies. I have movies that I typically will like, not really watch, but I'll turn on whenever I'm going to bed. I need noise to go to bed to. And movies do that for me. But I'll do that. And for a long time, I was just rewatching the hell out of Blue Beetle. That was like just a favorite comfort watch for me.
Yeah, it
So, because it's
is.
just so fun. It's like I love the family dynamics and stuff. Speaking of somebody who like has like my current family, my wife and kids and everything, we have a great relationship. But coming from a family that had a little bit of rockiness, growing up and everything like that, I didn't have that kind of close-ish family. We did at times, but it was still weird. Um, but like see, and I've known Hispanic people, Latino people throughout my life, and I've been around their families. And this was so true to life about what their families are like. I was just like, that's what made it so comfortable to me. I was like, I recognize people like this. And so that's always what's made it really a good comfort movie for me as well. So,
Yeah, well, that's why I liked it too, because it bridges those gaps, right? Because,
yeah.
that's how Native families are too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, to me, I'm always like, everybody has an Uncle Rudy. In
Right.
my
Yeah.
family, I'm Uncle Rudy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so and I think that's why, like I love shows, all of these diverse, like getting diverse
Yes.
perspectives. To me, I think that's what makes them so awesome and fun is just that we get to step outside of ourselves for a moment and get to see another perspective of the world or another perspective of a story that we're familiar with through a different lens. And I think
Absolutely.
that's what makes it fun and interesting. And it also kind of gives us the ability to create something more from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to leave it as well. So, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere online except for the bad space, and we all
Yes.
know what that is now. But you
Yep.
can find me on Blue Skies. I'm on Facebook still, but barely.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a pretty bad place too. So,
yes. Oh, yeah, it's become unusable
yeah.
because it's filled with like these bot pages now.
Yeah.
And all
Yeah.
they do is post rage baity stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, what in the world is this?
Yeah.
So it's crazy. But you can find me on Blue Skies and Instagram. But yeah, I think, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Yeah, and that's all I do these days is Instagram and Blue Sky at this point. Those are the only two, and I'd get off of off of Instagram too if there was a better alternative for that as well. So, hoping someday there's a better alternative for that. So,
Oh, well,
but
Blue Sky is getting their new
yeah,
Instagram, which I'm hoping to get an invite to.
yes, yeah, same, yeah. Hopefully that'll do well. They need to up their picture limit because I think they're still at 4 pictures on there, and they need to make it at
Yep,
least 10. But
we need
beyond that,
10.
it'll be great to have an alternative for sure. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. I really had a great time with this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, definitely. I will have to get you back on for a future episode. I, since I'm creepy and geeky and I tend to focus a lot more on horror, do you like horror movies? And would you be able to talk
Oh,
about those?
oh my gosh, you cannot get me to shut up about horror
Well,
movies.
there you go. See, I will
So
have you
Grim
back on.
Native is actually hopefully going to be our version of Fangoria
Oh, okay.
because it does focus on native horror and a lot of our native horror creatives who don't really get the shine that they deserve.
Right.
But it's a growing genre. So, I started Grim Native so we can start talking about native horror and recognizing, so many of the creatives that we have working in the industry. And
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm super excited about that. And don't get me started on Halloween. That's that is my series.
All right. All right. Well, I will definitely talk to you more offline about future stuff as well. So we'll get you back on probably sometime soon.
All
So,
right, cool. All right,
all
thank
right.
you
Well,
for
I
having me.
appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is produced and hosted by Robert Clark. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast by going to creepyandgeeky.com and clicking on any of the social links. If you'd like to follow me, you can find my links at geekthulu.com. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.